The cold came before the fear, long before the gunfire, before the shouting, before the explosions. It seeped into everything, our boots, our gloves, our bones, our thoughts. In the Ardennes forest, winter was not just a season. It was an enemy. Snow weighed down the trees, bending their branches low, while a thick fog crawled slowly through the frozen ground. Every breath burned my lungs. Every step felt heavier than the last. December of 1944 was unlike anything I had ever known. The world had turned white and silent, and inside that silence, death waited patiently. We had been moving through the forest cautiously, every sense stretched thin. The Germans had launched a massive counteroffensive, what would later be called the Battle of the Bulge, and the front lines were chaos. No one knew exactly where the enemy was, only that they were everywhere, hidden, watching, waiting. The snow muffled our footsteps, but it also muffled danger. It made the forest feel peaceful, almost beautiful, and that was what made it so terrifying. Beauty had no place there. Every calm moment meant an ambush was coming. Then the world exploded. The first burst of machine gun fire tore through the trees like lightning. Branches shattered, snow sprayed into the air. Men dropped instantly. We threw ourselves into the frozen ground, pressing our faces into the snow as bullets sliced inches above our heads. The Germans had perfect positions, dug in, camouflaged, overlapping fields of fire. We were trapped in a killing zone. Any attempt to move brought immediate punishment. I could hear the panic in the breathing of the men around me, the strained whispers, the muffled prayers. The sound of machine guns never stopped. It was constant, merciless, mechanical, like death itself had found a rhythm. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time stopped meaning anything. We were pinned, completely helpless. Every instinct told us to stay down, to survive, to wait for something to change. But nothing was changing. The longer we stayed, the more exposed we became. Men were already wounded, bleeding into the snow. Medics crawled forward under fire, risking their lives to save others. The smell of gunpowder mixed with blood and frozen earth. And above it all, the endless hammering of enemy fire. I lay there, staring at the ground inches from my face, watching my breath fog the snow. My heart pounded so hard I thought might burst. I could feel fear wrapping around my chest, squeezing tighter with every second. Fear is powerful. It tells you to stay alive. It tells you not to move. It tells you that courage is foolish. But another thought pushed through that fear, slow and heavy. If no one moves, we all die here. I thought of home, of warm kitchens, of quiet mornings, of voices that didn't carry the weight of war. I thought of the men beside me, some barely older than boys, shaking in the cold and terror. I thought of how history would never remember us if we died face down in the snow, frozen and afraid. And then I realized something simple and terrifying. The only way forward was through the guns. I didn't plan it. I didn't announce it. I didn't look back. I checked my rifle, tightened my grip on the grenades hanging from my belt, took one last breath, and stood up. The instant I broke cover, the enemy fire shifted toward me. The sound was deafening. Bullets snapped through the air so close I could feel the pressure of them passing. Snow burst around my boots. The world narrowed to a tunnel of white smoke and sound. I ran. Every step felt impossibly slow. My legs burned. My chest felt like it would collapse. But I kept running, forcing myself forward, ignoring the voice screaming inside me to stop. I reached the first machine gun nest almost without realizing it. The Germans were so focused on the men behind me that they never expected a lone soldier to charge them head on. I pulled a grenade, yanked the pin, and threw it with everything I had. I hit the ground. The explosion shook the forest. Snow and dirt rained down. When I stood again, the gun was silent, but I didn't stop. I ran again, deeper into the storm of bullets, toward the second position. My lungs burned, my vision blurred. I fired as I moved, forcing the enemy to duck, buying myself seconds. Seconds were everything. Another grenade, another explosion, another gun fell silent. By then I was bleeding. I could feel it soaking into my clothes, freezing almost instantly in the cold. My body screamed for me to stop, but the third machine gun still roared, and as long as it did, my men were dying. So I ran again. Each step felt heavier than the last. The forest spun, my ears rang, the world pulsed in and out of focus. I don't remember exactly how I reached that final position. Only fragments remain. The flash of muzzle fire, the rough bark of trees beneath my hands, the crushing weight of exhaustion. I threw my last grenade. The explosion echoed through the frozen woods. And then, silence. For the first time since the ambush began, the forest was quiet. I stood there, swaying, barely able to remain upright. Around me, smoke drifted lazily through the trees. Snow settled back onto the ground. In the distance, I could hear the voices of my men advancing, shouting, regrouping. The line had broken. The attack had stalled. And suddenly, painfully, I became aware of my wounds. Every breath hurt. My limbs trembled, but I was alive, and so were the men behind me. Later, when the fighting moved on and the medics finally reached me, they asked why I did it. I didn't have an answer that made sense. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt tired. I felt cold. I felt lucky to be breathing. What I knew was simple. Someone had to go. And in that moment, I was the one who stood up. In the days that followed, the battle continued to rage across the Ardennes. Towns were reduced to rubble, forests burned. Thousands would die before the German offensive was finally stopped. History would remember generals, strategies, maps, and movements. But in those frozen woods, none of that mattered. What mattered were individual choices, single moments where fear was challenged and duty took its place. When they told me about the Medal of Honor, it didn't feel real. No piece of metal could capture what that day was like. No ceremony could explain the sound of bullets cutting through snow, or the look in a wounded man's eyes when he realized he would live. Medals belong to peace. What we lived belonged to war. Even now, years later, the cold still visits me. Sometimes I wake in the night, feeling that frozen ground beneath my face, hearing those machine guns echoing through the forest. But I also remember the silence that followed. And in that silence, I remember why I stood up. Because freedom is never given. It is always taken step by step, choice by choice, by ordinary men who decide in extraordinary moments to move forward.